I think we take communication for granted. Most of us, we think we open our mouth, words come out, people will understand, and there's nothing further from the truth. And so good communication is concise, it's clear, and what it requires is that we actually think about it before we open our mouth.
Welcome to the Up Your Average podcast, where Keith and Doug give no-nonsense advice to level up your life. So buckle up and listen closely to Up Your Average.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Up Your Average. And today we're very fortunate to have Steve Haynes with us. Steve is the president of the Central Indiana Dale Carnegie Institute or program, and he has been helping people in Central Indiana for more than 43 years, which is mind-boggling to me. And I noticed on his website that he tries to help challenge the status quo of human behavior. And Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yes. And I smile when I think of Dale Carnegie, because when I first came across the name Dale Carnegie, I had no idea who that was. And I would say Dale Carnegie's an author, a speaker, and a teacher. And probably his most well-known book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it is a great resource. If you haven't read it, it's worth your read. I have a number of books on my bookshelf that I have here to give away. It was on my bookshelf. If you're ever in here and you can't afford it or don't have access to it, I've got one for you here. Yeah. Last summer, I came across How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And it might be the best gem that I've found on the books in a long, long time. If you have challenges with worrying or anxiety, I would highly encourage this book and give it a read. And so when I think of Carnegie, there's a lot of things that pop into my mind. I think of the Carnegie Deli, which is now defunct.
Right.
Have you ever been to the Carnegie?
I have been there. Yes, I have a hat.
Yeah, the Carnegie Deli. I don't know. They may still have it in one of the airports out there in New York, but it had I think the best deli sandwiches I've ever had.
Huge.
They charge like a sharing fee in the day. And then I think also the Carnegie Hall in New York City. A friend of mine did some opera there one time. I cheered him on to success there. As I was reading a little bit about Dale Carnegie, I think one of his early successes was a speaking engagement at the Carnegie Hall. And the Carnegie Hall was not named after Dale Carnegie, but Andrew Carnegie, who was born in 1835 and died in 1919. He was an industrialist and a philanthropist and no relationship whatsoever to Dale Carnegie.
That's right.
And yet, what he left behind was more than 2,500 libraries around the world, even one here in Carmel that's now Woody's Restaurant, which is not a bad place to grab a meal. And so when I was comparing that to Dale Carnegie, Dale was born in 1888, passed away in 1955. And just last week, Caleb and I were talking about the importance of a legacy. And I would say that his legacy was he's just helped millions of people around the world.
It's true.
Like if you were going to summarize Carnegie yourself, what would you say about him?
About the man, personally, I think he's a genius. And he helped us to understand how to have better relationships, how to be more successful in life. And success is described, it's defined by each individual in terms of their own definition of success. But for some people, it could be status, and other people it could just be connections, but just helps people live a happier, fuller, more successful life.
I love that. Well, what I thought I would pick your brain on initially, Steve, is the idea of communicating well, and my opinion is communicating well is it's nearly impossible. I think no matter what you're trying to do, it's easy to be misinterpreted or not understood. And why do you suppose communication is so difficult for people these days?
I think we take communication for granted. Most of us, we think we open our mouth, words come out, people will understand, and there's nothing further from the truth. And so good communication is concise, it's clear, and what it requires is that we actually think about it before we open our mouth. I think at least I know people that will start talking before they ever think. At least it appears that way. And so part of our coaching and our training is to help people in their communication. And first of all, just be a better listener. There's an old saying that says God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be doing twice as much listening as talking. Most of us don't use it in that proportion. And then how can we get our ideas across more clearly? And you may or may not remember from your time with Carnegie years ago that we teach what is called the magic formula. And this is a communication structure that Dale Carnegie started years ago. And what he would do is he would take his participants through some of the training and say, now go use this for the next week and come back and let me know if it worked or not. And some guy came back and goes, Mr. Carnegie, that communication structure you taught us last week, that works like magic. And from that point on, it's been deemed the magic formula. And what it is, it's a formula of getting our ideas across in an interesting way. It's a formula that motivational speakers will use when they are speaking in front of a group. And it has to do with the story and then having a point at the end. And in that, when we get to what we call the action benefit, a call to action and the benefit that will be realized if people follow that suggestion, what will happen, I coach people to get those 2 steps in 13 words or less.
Wow, 13 words.
Yeah. And I say that, and if somebody comes with 14, I'm like, we're not going to throw anything at you if you have 14 words, but 13 words or less, because again, it gets us focused to what is my real point here? What am I trying to get across? And so we continue practicing that through the training, and it gets people being more intentional about their thoughts, more intentional about their messages. And if we start there, I think communication will improve.
Boy, intentionality is huge in life, I think. And what you're describing, I think it might have been Abraham Lincoln that said something like, if you want a 1-hour speech, I can do it tomorrow. If you want a 10-minute speech, I'm probably going to need a week or so to prepare.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think we've been pretty intentional at Gimbal over the years is as a associate jumps on board, we try to help them make dictionaries of the language of the industry so that they are very scarce in using our language because it doesn't generally mean anything to anybody. And then, so how do we then communicate to somebody concisely about what's really going on in a very complicated area of life? And so, yeah, that's really good. So 13 words or less.
Mm-hmm.
And with 13 words, that would seem almost like a funnel to me, Steve. Like you would start with like a big idea and just have to keep chiseling down.
Yeah. When we are preparing this message, we think, what's the point I want to get across, or what's the action that I want this individual to take? And once we figure that out, then we figure out what's the evidence that's going to support my thought.
Okay.
And that evidence many times is just a story of, an example, if you will.
Okay. So with a culture today that communication has really seems to me fallen off the cliff a bit, a couple ideas that I've learned over the years, like if you're going to communicate good news, you can do that face to face, over the phone, texting or writing, and any of those are fine. But with bad news, is if at all possible, you should probably deliver bad news face to face or with a phone call, but never a text or never a letter.
Yeah.
And I don't think that idea has been really communicated well to people in general, and particularly those that are in the digital society, I think, because it seems like a lot of heartache, a lot of broken relationships happen because of the cell phone.
Oh, absolutely. I can remember you may or may not have been at Union Brewery here in Carmel, Indiana. And back before they moved and they had these fire pits and everything outside, I met a friend there one evening, and it was like a fall evening, and we're sitting by the fire pit, and there's this couple all dressed up, young couple around 30, all dressed up. And I glance over there every now and then, and this guy's just on his phone, his cell phone. And this young lady is just sitting there and waiting. And after probably about 15 minutes or so, she gets up, she comes over, and she sits at the fire pit with us. And I said, "You're awfully dressed up for a fire pit." She goes, Yeah. She goes, "My date's on his phone." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry. She goes, yeah, it's our first date.
First and last, probably.
And I'm pretty sure it was the last date as well, because he could have been a brain surgeon and they needed him. He could have been a business. She had no idea what the phone call was about. He just got on the phone and it was just giving her an impression she's not important. And too many times, because of our cell phones, that's the message that we're projecting to others.
What? So I haven't. I was in the demographic that, as a dad, the iPod was a new technology, and the cell phones were starting to be more prevalent and given to children. I was like, you guys can't have one. Little did I know that they were smarter than me, and they were using the iPod like a cell phone. And I was trying, as a younger dad, to limit their access to these things. But today, it doesn't even seem like that's even considered a lot of times. And yet, it seems like without any real training on how do you communicate with one of these things effectively,
right,
that people are being taught just horrible communication ideas.
Yeah. Probably the best thing, and quite frankly, I don't have an account, but X or Twitter, it's my understanding that there's a limited amount of characters that you can have in there. It used to be like 165 or something. Now it's double that, which I think is a good thing, because again, it forces us to, what's the message? Now, some people just do run on messages, one after the other, until they get it all out. But again, if we can think in terms of what's the point I'm trying to get across, and what's the quickest, clearest way to make that happen, that's going to be beneficial for all. They say that people's attention span is about 2 minutes in length. And so if we're going over that, we're losing their attention.
So then let's say I'm a 15-year-old.
Yes.
And I really haven't trained in communication. And I'm tuning into this for some reason. And I'm trying to think, okay, what should I know about communication? What would you tell, like 2 or 3 tips for a 15-year-old? Because I would imagine the average 15-year-old, most of their communication is going to happen right here. So
true.
Off the top of your head, what would you offer to that youngster today?
I'd offer a couple things, and I've already stated one, which is think in terms of what's the point of this message that you're going to be sending? What's the point? Secondly, I think about the receiver. Who's the receiver? Yesterday, I was doing a workshop, a 4-hour workshop, and we were talking about the different personality styles and tendencies. And we have the visionary, which is a big picture person. We have the driver, which is the person you want to give something to and then get out of the way because they're going to get it done. We have the facilitator, which is the nice people that we always like to hang out with, and they're the glue that holds the team together. And then we have the analyzer, which are the ones that cross the T's and dot the I's, keep us in compliance and out of prison. So you think of the different personality types, we communicate differently. So and I'm a visionary driver is what I am, but as a visionary, I think big picture. There's a member of my team who's very analytical, and he's incredibly detail oriented. So we've had to learn to communicate to one another's style. So when I'm talking to him, I have to bring in more details, give him more details. And when he's talking to me, he's got to cut them out, knowing that I'll ask questions if I have additional follow-up, if I need more information. So the point is, it's not what we know, it's what the other person needs to hear, what the other style needs to hear. So I would suggest that a 15-year-old think in terms of the style, but who knows, if you're a 15-year-old, have you even developed your style? You probably have, but then we've got adults compared to other teenagers, compared to kids, and we need to talk to those particular aspects of it.
So in the old, I think what I hear you say, Steve, is in the old-fashioned telephone that you held in the middle, you had a transmitter down here at the bottom, and you had a receiver up here into your ear. And so if I was going to communicate as the transmitter, I hear you saying I should think about the receiver, the person that's receiving. What do they need to hear from me, rather than just what all's going to maybe get back to that funnel of 13 words? Like, not tell them everything that I know, but kind of take into account their personality and what they need to hear from me.
Yeah, it's what they need to hear from you, but it's how we say it that's going to make sense to them. And so I'll give you an example. This gentleman on my team that I talked about, he's been in the Carnegie business 20 years. He's been on my team for 15 years. Again, highly analytical, smart guy, good guy. And when he came to me early on 15 years ago, he taught a class on a Tuesday night. On a Wednesday morning, I said, "Hey, David, how'd the class go last night?" Now, being a big picture kind of guy, I'm looking for, hey, it went great. We had this many people in attendance. These were the award winners, that kind of thing. And we're done. 3 or 4 sentences and we're out. And about 4 or 5 minutes later, I stopped him and I said, "David, I know how to teach the class. All I asked is, how did it go?" So again, to his credit, he's learned to cut all of that out and just give me this. And that's what we need to think about.
That's really cool. That's probably a good lesson for all of us, no matter where we are in life, to just really take into account who we're with, what they're hearing from us, and what they maybe are trying to hear from us versus what we're trying to say too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. That's a good starting place for most of this thought process. So I'm going to jump into a little bit of drolling on about Keith and the younger version of me. And I thought when I was 24 years old, I would conquer the universe, was my thought. I got a job with a Fortune 500 company down in Houston, Texas. And in my projections, I just projected a 10% growth of my income for the foreseeable future. I don't know if people do that anymore, but as a young, aggressive kid, that's what I was thinking. And I got my first annual review, and maybe I got 4 or 5%, which was today. I think that's probably pretty good, knowing how kind of wages have gone. But I was traumatized by that. And my boss said, "You just really stink in public speaking, Keith." And so then I probably was pretty. It probably took me a few days to gain my wits. If I think about the younger version of me, that was probably pretty disruptive to my soul at that point. And somehow, and I don't really have any idea how I would have discovered the Dale Carnegie course, because I was thinking about it, Steve. I can't remember how I would have researched something prior to the internet. Like, that's maybe it was an ad in the paper. I don't know.
That would be my guess. And,
okay.
And I were you down in Evansville at that time? Houston, Texas. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how they advertised in Houston. I can tell you here locally, what we would do is we would generally have an ad in the sports section.
Okay. Well, that would make sense. I would have seen it back then. So my personality was crushed because of this 5% pay raise. And I was given feedback that I didn't care to hear at the point in time, but it was true. I wasn't a very good public speaker. And so I called the Carnegie people, evidently from this advertisement, and said, "Tell me about this." And they gave me a feedback on what the Carnegie course was. And then I brought that to my supervisor and said, "Hey, this is maybe what will help me to improve my skills so I can help the company in the years ahead. Will you guys pay for this thing?" And they were in a slump. That department was in a slump. Their revenues weren't doing what they thought. And they said, "This quarter isn't a very good one. Bring it back next quarter and we'll see what happens." So they ran it up the food chain, maybe one level that time, and it came back no. And so I put it on my calendar a quarter later. They ran it up maybe an extra level and ran it back down and said no. I can't remember if it took 3 or 4 quarters before they approved it. And as an adult, I look back and it's like, it had to cost them more to make the decision than the course actually cost at the end of the time. So I took that course, and it was $500 back then. You reminded me, it's probably in the mid 80s, was probably a 14-week course. And I was going to share with our friends here the success that I gained with this. So this was the Dale Carnegie course in 1984. I got in week 8 the Outstanding Performance Award
Woohoo.
from Randy Laporte and Bob Culpepper. So it seemed to be like there were 2 awards every week in the course when I took it. But then the entertaining part of this was, if y'all can see this, the version of Keith there, the youngster with much skinnier than today, but the joy of getting the award in that day and time was quite high for me. So clearly there's some reinforcement to the skills that you're learning in the course.
Yes.
And so I got that award. The one of the supervisors that I worked with at that point in time ended up being one of the top 4 or 5 executives at that Fortune 500 company. And the 2 of us were traveling to Silicon Valley together. And while we were there, they had these little overheads back in the day when you give a presentation, a little kind of plasticky slide you put on there, and it would project up on the board. And one of the ideas I remember clearly from the courses at Carnegie was to know your topic well.
Mm-hmm.
And I failed that part. I was midway through the Carnegie course because I didn't have an engineering degree, and I was presenting an engineering idea to a room full of engineers. And so I put the slide on the overhead projector, and I stumbled with my words a bit. And all of a sudden, I felt like beads of sweat popping on my head back then. And I was like, oh, this is not good. So I started getting more and more self-conscious. And those beads of sweat then went from underneath my hairline at the time to my forehead here. And then they started running off my nose, hitting the overhead projector and blowing up on the screen like a bomb going off.
Oh boy.
It was a humiliating, humbling time. And I was close friends with my boss at the time, and we were cleaning up afterwards, and he joked with me, looks like that Carnegie thing's working out real well. And I love the idea of a sense of humor. But I think the idea of the Carnegie course is probably not really clear and concise in my head. I think of it today, after all these years, as a public speaking course. And I think it's much more than that. And so I was wondering if you could tell our friends a little bit about the basic Dale Carnegie course and why it might make sense to them.
Yeah, I will start by saying, after being a trainer in this program for 43 years, you would think I'd be just, it's old stuff. I'm bored with it. It's dull. And it's anything but. I still have a great passion for this because it's a transformational program. And there are 5 drivers of success that we focus on, not in any particular order, but here they are. Number 1, it helps people develop a greater level of confidence. Our graduates, and by the way, this is now 8 weeks, meaning once a week for 3.5 hours. Our graduates tell us at the end of the 8 weeks that their confidence has gone up on average between 60 and 70%. Which allows them to be themselves in all situations and make better decisions more quickly. Secondly, it helps us to understand people better, where they're coming, why they say the things they say and do the things they do, so that we can work with them more easily. Thirdly, it helps us to communicate our ideas more clearly, concisely, so we won't be misunderstood. And it helps us to be better listeners. Fourthly, it helps to improve our attitude and reduce stress. And according to our participants, at the end of the 8 weeks, their stress level has gone down by 50%, which allows them to be more proactive when the pressure's on, instead of being reactive, and they can sleep better at night. And lastly, it helps them to develop greater leadership skills so that we can get people to do the kind of things we need them to do. And it's just an amazing program.
And if I were to go into a class today, if I signed up for it, what would the class size look like? Who would I be hanging out with in general? Who would I expect to be with?
The class size, I would say, depends on the time of year, but let's just say it's around 20.
Okay.
Give or take, it's around 20. And the people involved, they're from literally every aspect of life that you can possibly imagine. We will have CEOs of national organizations within our training here in Central Indiana. And we will have blue collar workers. Also in the class, we will have teenagers in the class, and everything in between. The one thing that they all have in common is they're pretty good at what they're doing and they want to become even better. They're success minded. And that's the common theme with all of them.
So when I think about that idea, and there's a book, I think it was called Quiet, that talks about half of our culture is introverts and half of our culture is extroverts. So when 25-year-old Keith went into the class, I would have classified myself as an introvert and afraid of public speaking, meeting new people and things like that. How would an introverted person take that first step, I guess? I'm not worried about the extrovert. I figure they're jumping into it, but the introvert.
First step in taking the class and first step in the class?
Probably both. How would I get the nerve to initiate getting information and registering the class? And then once I'm there and I'm going to see 20 people there that I don't know,
Sure.
What's that going to feel like to me?
It's actually going to feel great. You're probably going to feel a little nervous coming in, but I'll take this a step at a time. And that is, how would you go about the process of just learning more? Well, you can get on our website. Our local website is indy.dalecarnegie.com. My email address is steve.hanes, Hanes, at dalecarnegie.com. So those are two ways. And we have conversations with everybody before they get started. And the conversations are just to make sure that the person clearly understands what the program is about, what they can expect, what we will expect. And it's designed to make sure that we're getting them, doing the right thing with this individual. In my 43 years, there have been only 2 times where I go, I don't think this is the right program for you. So it can happen.
Wow.
And I would rather head that off than them come through it with these expectations that are just not going to be realistic.
Right.
So that's why we have the conversations. And what I'm told by the individuals, and by the way, the conversations can take 10 to 20 minutes, maybe.
Okay.
What I'm told by them is they're usually energized and excited about going through this program, and sometimes from what the bosses suggested that they do. Once they're in the program, that they're usually going to come in a little bit nervous. We get people involved immediately. And as a result, some of those inhibitions start just coming down. That anxiety starts coming down. We have fun, but it's fun with a purpose. And by the end of that very first session, I'll usually say, okay, so you walk out of here, you stop by the store on your way home, you see a friend, they're going, hey, what are you doing? Where are you coming from? You go, I just came from this Dale Carnegie course. I go, really? What's that like? My question to the group at the end of the session is, how would you respond to that in one word? And usually what I'm hearing are things like energizing. It's fun. It's practical. It's just a great experience. So it is very infrequent, if ever, that we have anything opposite of that. In fact, we do a couple different evaluations at the end of the training, and one is based on their experience, and the average is about 96.8 out of 100 in terms of good experience. The other question has to do with what's the likelihood of you recommending this to someone else, and that's usually around 93%.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, we get good results.
That's really cool. The idea that a person could be a teenager or a CEO of a corporation is really thought-provoking to me, because I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, where would I go today to find that kind of diversity in a meeting somewhere that we're all kind of encouraged to know one another. And I have kind of memories of the kind of conversations that went on in my class back then, but all of it is just really a fond memory. And I think one of the things that when I was prepping for our time together was that there are some of these courses that are offered at universities. I don't know if it's necessarily on the curriculum at the university, or maybe that's kind of an extracurricular thing that students, but it looks like around the country, sometimes college students can get a discounted version of this at their particular university. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of what I gathered.
Yeah, that does happen across the country. And I can tell you, with regard to being part of the curriculum, in the business school of the University of Central Tennessee, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but something like that, it is a part of the curriculum. You got to go through it.
Oh.
Now, we did 9 semesters of leadership training here locally with Purdue University.
Okay.
And many of the students told me it was their favorite class on campus.
Okay.
But that was not part of the curriculum, and it was sponsored by Marriott Corporation because it was through the hospitality school.
Okay.
And it went so well, they wanted to make it a part of the curriculum, but they didn't want to have to abide by Carnegie standards to embed that into their curriculum. And so they, in the meantime, took that money from Marriott and put it somewhere else. And so after 9 semesters of success, we're not doing that there anymore.
That's really thought provoking in of itself. I was kind of asking that because I think if you had a teenager today and you're concerned about their ability, maybe as they're either going into their career or they're going into college, and their communication skills and social skills, it seems like that this would be a worthwhile investment even before they would go into those things.
Yes.
Like before they would go to college. If they're going to leave, you might want to invest in that for them. And if they're going to do something, Caleb has some friends that didn't go to college and have small businesses. I could see this being a great benefit to them as well.
Yeah. The youngest person I've personally ever had in any of my training, that I've had a couple of them, was 13-year-olds.
Nice.
And the youngest I've ever heard in a Dale Carnegie training across the country was a 9-year-old.
Wow.
And supposedly at the end of that training, the 9-year-old said, "I wish I'd taken this last year because it would have helped me to deal with my teacher."
That's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I've spent probably, I'm thinking maybe a good amount of time in the last 6 months talking about the words confidence and hope in some of my communication. And it seems culturally as though there's not a lot of confidence or hope with a lot of people today. And so if you take this course and you're going to be 60 to 70% more confident, I can't imagine there's any downside to your investment for something like that. And I think in our original conversation, Steve, we were talking a little bit about this book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And I'd say the idea of how I think a pandemic of anxiety and worry in our culture is probably not an extreme kind of statement, but to say that the Dale Carnegie course reduces stress by 50%, that's quite a claim right there. Like that's if anxiety and worry is the deal, this book probably will go a long way in helping you. But like, I guess I wouldn't have thought to gauge that from the Dale Carnegie course, but like, does that even become conversations with people, what their anxiety or their stress is? I kind of see stress and anxiety kind of the same thing. So
Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about that, like how the Carnegie course even addresses or helps people with that particular topic.
Absolutely. I think that what we do in Carnegie is needed now more than ever. And the class, Mr. Carnegie started the training back in 1912, and I genuinely believe it's needed now more than ever. The pandemic has something to do with that, but the phones and the technology, and we don't have to have these personal connections anymore. But coming back to the stress thing, I have paid attention to stress, I'll say for 25, 30 years in the workplace. And what it seems to me is it just keeps ratcheting up every year. It just goes up to another notch, another level. And when people that care about us see that we're stressed, they'll say things like, "Don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep giving it your best effort." All well intended, but they don't help us to understand how to get rid of the stress. So in that book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, there are 30 practical principles that when we use them will help us to minimize the stress in our life. And I use the word minimize because we'll never get rid of it. And that's okay, because there is good stress, which is called eustress, EU stress. And then there's bad stress, which is distress. The distress, that's the stuff that brings us down, eats away at us. The eustress actually keeps us going. So some things of good stress would be like, for me to be here with you today, I had to stress my body to get out of bed and get moving, right? Other good stress would be having a baby, getting a promotion, getting a new house, or there's stresses there because it's new, but it's all good. And so it's understanding how to deal with those distress moments and how to take greater control of those. That plus the confidence, more confident we are, the less things are going to rattle us. And those things go together. The more effective we are at dealing with people, because many times it's people versus situations that are causing the stress, we can bring that down.
That's beautiful. I'm really grateful for your time and thoughts today. And again, that Steve's given you ways to contact him and get yourself or your loved one plugged into this course. And I think I'll close with this chant. I don't know if they do chants at the Carnegie courses anymore. And this is dating back a bunch of years ago, but I'm pretty sure one of the chants that I said on a regular basis was, I have the courage of 10,000 Bengal tigers and I'll never give up, was part of the course that we had back then. And my hope for all of you is that you can live more confidently, more courageously, and less stressfully. And so reach out, give this a shot, either the books or the courses. I think you'll be really grateful that you did. Steve, thanks for your time.
Thanks for the invitation.